All right, we are back with another episode of the Dynasty Drive. We're doing another one live, and I'm joined tonight by Jeff Bell. Jeff, I appreciate you taking the time to hop on with me, man.
Hey, Anthony, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'm very excited. We were talking before show about some of the exciting things, and so I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, man. For anybody who's not already checking out your good work with FantasyPros and going for two, make sure real quick plug everything that you do, where people can find you, follow you, all that good stuff, and then we'll get into all the craziness that went down.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm available on Twitter, obviously at For Whom J Bell Tolls. I'm available with FantasyPros, doing Devy content and doing NFL content over there, and going for two, a little bit of everything too, some Devy content, some NFL content pop in. And I'm excited to announce that we have a new podcast coming up with myself, Kevin Coleman at The Boys 22 on Twitter, and then Christian Williams at C Williams NFL on Twitter. And we are launching the Devy Royale, which will be a one-of-a-kind show. And I'm not going to say anything else, but we are very excited about it. We've been working hard on it, and we're going to be ready to go.
That's awesome. I love both of those guys. Kevin and Christian are both awesome. They've both been I was just on with Christian recently, and Kevin was on this show a couple weeks back. But you guys all do really great stuff in the Devy space. So we will definitely make sure to check that out and plug it and retweet it and all that good stuff. But we got you're an AFC East guy. I'm an AFC East guy. Sam Darnold traded. My New York Jets trade Sam Darnold to the Carolina Panthers. Compensation wise, it's a 6th round pick in 2021 and a 2nd and 4th round pick, both in 2022 that the Jets get. And talk is, it seems like Panthers will move on from Bridgewater. They'll exercise Darnold's option. It's an interesting move because I think it's a worthwhile move for the Panthers. You needed something more than what you got out of Bridgewater last year. It'll be interesting for Darnold because, he's got a better set of weapons than he ever had with the Jets. It's kind of bittersweet. It's exciting to see the Jets embark on another new quarterback, but it's also kind of sad for, what could have been or what everybody hoped would have been for Darnold's career in New York. So your quick thoughts on the Darnold trade and kind of how that shakes the landscape moving forward.
Well, I think I can commiserate with you. This is kind of an every 3 year holiday for us as Bills and Jets fans that we cast off our old franchise quarterback and we go with the new one. So in that regard, it's exciting for you. Looking at Darnold in Carolina, my first takeaway was that wouldn't necessarily rule out them going quarterback at 8. I kind of put that out on Twitter and took the temperature, and Jeff Hasley actually commented on it, and he said they are most certainly going with Sam Darnold as franchise quarterback, which is interesting to me. I don't know. You saw firsthand. I'm not really sold on Darnold being a franchise quarterback. I don't even know if I really saw the glimpses that we were hoping to see throughout the first couple of years. And so it seems interesting to me that Carolina would go with that as the move. I thought the compensation was very fair from Carolina's standpoint, really a 2nd round pick, that 4th and that 6th. Hopefully, I would imagine they would want to recoup some of that with Teddy Bridgewater and bring a little bit more back. At first I thought it was said more about Teddy Bridgewater in their plans than Darnold, but I think they're going to give him a shot.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the compensation from when Rosen got dealt a couple of years back after the Cardinals drafted Kyler Murray. Yeah. It is funny because I think there's been a lot of quicker reaction than I'd expect to be like, oh, well, Sam Darnold is definitely better than Teddy Bridgewater. Like, I don't know that is the case. Yes. And I've long rooted for him, and the Jets did nothing to help his development in any way. See Adam Gase and subsequent decisions year in and year out. But like you said, as much as the Jets as an organization failed him to put talent around him and a solid infrastructure in terms of an offensive line and so on and so forth, he didn't do much in terms of that consistency that you want to see from the 3rd overall pick in the 2018 draft. You saw flashes here and there, but the mechanics really started to fall apart last year. So I hope that he can get back to what everybody, thought he could be at one point. But it'll be interesting to see if it does happen for Carolina. For the Jets, it's not surprising for me. I've been saying for a couple months that I would be really, really shocked if a new head coach and a general manager who didn't take Sam Darnold opted to hitch their wagons to a guy that was going to be due this 5th-year option for almost $19 million next year. So they're obviously locked into a quarterback at 2. it seems like all the buzz is about them taking Zach Wilson. I know you're a Justin Fields guy. I have Justin Fields as QB2 as well. However, I'm riding the hilarious wave of just, rooting for Zach Wilson because it's very fun. I'd be very happy with either of them, but your quick thoughts on, presuming Zach Wilson goes second overall and how you think that shakes out and maybe where Fields ends up after that.
Yeah, I'm not sold on Wilson. I've seen some comparisons. He reminds me a lot of Baker Mayfield. I think he's a guy that, you see him in college and you see him scramble around and make some plays, and you hope that kind of that Mahomes thing can translate to the NFL, being able to throw off platform, creative arm angles and things like that. I just think the athleticism isn't quite there that you would hope to see out of that type of role. And I think we've seen it. I worry about him being needed to be reined in, much like Baker Mayfield was, where Baker came from Oklahoma and he was running around and making plays happen. He really fell apart that second year. And then really the Browns put the training wheels back on this past year, made sure that he developed. And I think that Wilson's going to very much be in that mold. It worries me from the Jets standpoint of not having that infrastructure, not having that offensive line, not having those running backs to lean on. I think Mims and Corey Davis are okay players, but I just don't know that, for much the same reasons we saw Darnold struggle, that it's going to be built for success for Wilson. Certainly they'll try to put more places in there, but if Tevin Coleman and Michael Pirine are their running backs, that worries me, putting a rookie in that situation. As far as Fields go, it's just so tough to judge right now, and I think a lot of it, we need to stop and recognize that we're kind of in that misinformation season. A lot of things get put out there, and it's all coming from the media right now. And it's one of those things that, this class as a whole and this whole conversation really reminds me of that 2018 class that we saw with Baker and with Josh Allen. And, the media was talking about Rosen nonstop. And then we kind of got to the draft and he fell back. And then the NFL guys, usually after the draft, they'll talk way more than they will before draft, obviously. And they said that Rosen wasn't really even in consideration with the other guys. And so I kind of wonder if Justin Fields is a little bit of that. A whole bunch of teams like him a whole lot, and they don't want to say anything nice because they're hoping that they can move in position to get him. I think maybe they're hoping that the Jets don't wake up and realize that they're going to take Wilson over Justin Fields, which obviously I'm wearing my Buckeye stuff. I can be accused of homerism in that regard, but certainly I think being a homer, you can probably relate as a Jets fan, I'm hard on my players, and when it comes to evaluation, I make sure that I watch them again and again just to make sure that I can remove some of that bias. But I do love Fields, and I think he's a special talent.
Yeah, for sure. It'll be interesting to see where he ends up. I would love to see if he does go to San Francisco at 3.
Yeah.
I know there's all the Mac Jones smoke right now, but kind of shifting into talking about some of the pro days, both Fields and Wilson had pretty wild pro days. It was that Zach Wilson had that falling away across his body throw and everybody, went nuts over it. But that last real deep bomb from Fields was kind of the same thing. It's like, man, we're not really talking about this also being an absolutely ridiculous throw, and just highlights some of the crazy athleticism and arm talent that Fields has. That I think it would be really fun to see him in an offense, that Shanahan offense with Kittle and Debo, if he can stay healthy, and Brandon Ayuk. But both of the quarterbacks look great. Mac Jones pro day, there was a lot of the funny tweets with like the overthrows and, Shanahan's face and all that stuff. But both quarterbacks, both of the, presumably the second and third quarterbacks that should go off the board, whether Mac Jones sneaks in there or not, Fields and Wilson both look pretty good. We've talked about them, a pretty good deal already, but any other notable takeaways for you from their pro days?
I just loved that Fields he saw what Wilson did and he was like, I can do that too. And so he went out there and made that same exact throw. And he said, what's the big deal? Guys, I got this. And I loved hearing him afterwards. He said, if I need to throw for all 32 teams, that's fine. Let's go. I'll throw for all 32 teams individually. You mentioned San Francisco. I would just love that fit as Justin Fields fan, as a supporter. It just seems wild to me, the things that we're hearing about Mac Jones right now. I've been reading this past weekend about the success when quarterbacks are able to sit. It'd be great to put him in San Francisco, maybe let them go with Jimmy G a little bit and let Fields kind of ease his way into the NFL. I don't know. I just don't know where he's really going to land, though. It's really hard for me to conceptualize that we've got this guy that many of us are very, very high on. Obviously, my guy Christian's got him number one. I'm right there with him too. That's how we met, our shared affinity for Justin Fields. To have this slip to 4 or 5 in the class just seems wild to me. As any other class, this guy can make every single throw in the book. He's got 4.4 speed. He's prototypical size. This is like what you dream about when the quarterback comes around, and the fact that he's just slipping down the board, it's wild.
Christian is resident Justin Fields #1 guy across Twitter and the globe. I have told him on multiple occasions he gets unlimited victory laps, like if everything hits right. So Christian, it's me giving you your due again for being Justin Fields #1 guy. But moving on from the quarterbacks, on the tight end side of things, it was all Kyle Pitts at the Florida Pro Day. And it's kind of there's been weird kind of discussion on both sides right now, where you have Kyle Pitts is a generational tight end prospect. We haven't seen anything like him. Runs a 4.44, 88 3/8 inch wingspan, 6'5", 245 pounds. Freaky guy. Like, we know what he can do. We saw what he did at Florida. A mismatch nightmare, can be dominant in the red zone. But then you have the other side of the field where it's like, okay, well, we do kind of have these athletic guys every year. Noah Fant, Alberto, Mike Gesicki, going back to Vernon Davis. Do you think Kyle Pitts is somebody that can come in, make an impact right away? Or is it something where we've got to be patient? The tight end position always takes some time to adjust. And, it's important to, I know it's easy for us all to be like, Kyle Pitts is tight end 4 in Dynasty, and because the profile is so exciting. But do you think he can come in and contribute right away, or we got to pump the brakes and be a little more patient with him?
I do think he can contribute right away. We've seen him as the featured wide receiver in Florida. I think that's one of the things that we talk about some of these other tight ends that haven't taken off right away, that their offenses never ran through them the way that Florida kind of ran through Pitts and Tony. And so that excites me, testing off the charts. I think it's fair to be concerned about pumping the brakes. And it really kind of depends where he ends up, what kind of scheme and role that they put him in. I tend to believe that Atlanta's going to grab him, because everything that I hear that he's been saying, he's said he's been talking to them a lot. And I would love him to be in that spot, because they'd be able to have Hayden Hurst there to kind of do the more standard tight end duties and be able to break him free of the line, kind of treat him more as that third wide receiver and move tight end. And so I think that would really unlock his potential, especially getting a veteran quarterback like Matt Ryan, and then also having, Julio Jones in the locker room, a guy that can potentially take him under his wing and help him develop. Some of the testing, it's like he's the first guy this size to do this since Calvin Johnson. And so it's wild that the idea that you can line him up at tight end, he can still kind of be passable in some of the tight end intricacies, but at the same time, I just think the potential is through the roof. And the reality of it is whether or not you think it's going to be there. I mean, that's the price in Dynasty, and that's going to be the price that you're paying for him. So either you want to hop on board or you're just going to miss. And you just have to be comfortable living with that maybe it'll take a year or two. And I've seen some takes that buy him after year one, but that if somebody's thinking a top 5 pick into him and there's flashes at all, they're not selling him after year one. And so I think it's one of those things. If you want him, grab him.
Yeah, it's not going to. And I've seen that take a lot where it's like, trade for him, halfway through his rookie year or something like that. But the hype, right or wrong, and I agree, I think he is the most exciting tight end prospect out of what we've seen in the last recent years. The, Hawkinson, Fant, all those guys. Pitts is a cut above the rest for me too. But like you said, if someone's spending a top half of the first round rookie pick on this guy, they're not, realistically, they're not selling super low. He's going to be a player that it feels like almost at worst case scenario is a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. And I almost think, like you said, Atlanta makes a lot of sense. I almost think Cincinnati at 5 is maybe the floor. Yeah. If not, then Miami at 6. Yeah. I don't really think he makes it past those 3 teams. So yeah, I don't know how much you can buy the dip if there's any, lack of production early on, but he's an exciting player. Atlanta would be fun. Him, Julio, and Calvin Ridley would be a fun trio of pass catchers, and RB1 Mike Davis with all my Mike Davis dynasty shares.
Good luck with that one.
I'm holding out hope. No running back draft picks for this.
Yes. That's like I forget who it is, but somebody keeps having that tweet whenever somebody signs somewhere else with Myles Gaskin, and they just have the Super Mario Brothers like ducking under the bullet, and Myles Gaskin signs somewhere else. But
him too.
It very much like that. But I agree with you completely.
So a bunch of wide receiver pro days, and we'll start with the guy that throughout this process for me, I've been pretty locked in that there wasn't a whole lot in the offseason or the pre-draft process that could have changed Jamar Chase being wide receiver 1 for me. But he still ran faster than a lot of people expected. Sub 4.4 speed, 4.38, eliminated the questions that some people might have had about his long speed. I wasn't too worried about it. He looks plenty fast on tape, running away from corners when he was 19 years old. So I wasn't super, super concerned about how fast he would run. Anything changed for you as Chase? Do you have him as wide receiver 1 in this class or somebody else?
Yeah, he is my wide receiver 1. You know, we saw him on the same field with Justin Jefferson and with Terrace Marshall when LSU won that national championship, and he stood out above college football. I believe he won the Biletnikoff. He is just an unbelievable athlete. I truly think he's the only one in this class that right now I see as having number 1 wide receiver potential. I think that maybe some concerns. I liked Bateman before, but that coming in at 6 foot, that's raises some questions, and just some of the other questions on the other guys. It's Chase by far and away for me.
Yeah, I agree. I have my concerns with Bateman as well. I don't hate him. I just don't think he doesn't do anything for me that I am like, oh, wow, he's an elite prospect. I think he's a good route runner. I think his releases are good. But I think he relies a little bit on body catching. I'm a little hesitant with that. Not a bad player, but there's just guys ahead of him. It's more a product of who I like ahead of him that pushes him down a little bit for me. And one of them is a guy that you just mentioned, Chase's former teammate, Terrace Marshall Jr., also runs sub 4.4.
Yes.
That might have been even more impressive for me than Chase's time. He's a guy that early on in the offseason, I'm glad I came back to him and watched him a second time, because the first time around I came away like, oh, I like Terrace Marshall a lot. And then went back and watched him again and was like, oh, I like him a lot more than I thought I did the first time around. Had double-digit touchdowns in both 2019 and 2020, and he only played in 7 games in 2020. He's somebody that honestly right now, he's my wide receiver 4. I love Terrace Marshall. 4.38 feels, and pro day times this year, take them all with a grain of salt. I get it. But that one felt like a big win in the speed column for Terrace Marshall Jr.
It really did. And he's a guy that, again, like when I watched him the first time, we tend to hang up on, there was a couple concentration drops and, things like that. And you watched him move and he didn't seem like a guy that was quick or fast like that. He seemed like a guy that really knew how to use his body. He's obviously a huge guy, but then to come out there and lay that time down, that opened eyes. And, I've definitely gone back and watched him again as well. He shows all the things that you want to see, and he really stands out because the lack of size in this class, it's something that's been talked about lately. These guys measure in. If you want that big wide receiver, Marshall's going to be your guy early.
Yeah, it almost, the time and how fast he actually is almost reminds me of Denzel Mims last year. Where like he doesn't look like a track guy or super quick, but he's big and has those long strides and almost just like glides down the field. Really excited about him. The opposite end, the much, I don't want to say smaller, but I guess shorter end of the wide receiver spectrum. 2 guys, Rondale Moore and Kadarius Toney. I feel like you can say those names and Twitter can erupt for a variety of reasons, one way or the other. But it almost feels like the consensus or the hype has cooled a bit on Rondale Moore. The explosive athletic ability showed up in a big way on pro day. 4.29, I think, was the 40 time, and a 42.5-inch vertical. Like, he's explosive for days. We know that. I think it's funny that people freaked out a little bit, like, oh, he's only 5'7". It's like, well, he was only 5'9" before. Like,
exactly.
So if he's small, he was still small. It was just a little bit smaller. But it feels like the hype isn't where it quite was, a month or 2 ago, as potentially, a late day 1 pick in the NFL draft or, an early second rounder. It feels like that might have cooled down a little bit. In terms of rookie drafts, he feels like a guy that, in standard, in one quarterback formats might be falling out of the first round, and Superflex is almost definitely falling out of the first round. Are you in or you out on Rondale Moore? What do you think?
I'm in. I like
In?
it. I go back to that misinformation season, and I followed the NFL for a long time, and it just seems like leading up to the draft, the guys that go quiet before the draft, watch out for them, because those are the guys that teams really want. Whereas like the guys that you start to hear more and more buzz about, like those are the guys that it feels like they end up kind of more sliding towards later day three. I think a lot of, right now we're in the media driven portion of the draft lead up. The draft is a TV show. And so I think there are definitely some narratives that the media likes to lay down and embrace. You set themselves up for talking about, how's this guy not gone yet? Or, oh my God, I can't believe this guy went. Nobody's been talking about him. It just seems like a guy that, tests like that, the production that he put out his freshman year, I think teams kind of envision being able to use him in that role. I don't know. Tyreek Hill seems like a massive upside comp for him. Maybe the role that we saw Carolina use Curtis Samuel in last year, where you're just kind of figuring out ways to get him the ball out of the backfield in space. We saw Tyler Ervin with Green Bay kind of try to do some of those things, but that's Tyler Ervin. And, I definitely think there's a role in modern offense for those type of players. And I do think there's a couple in this class. I think maybe Elijah Moore might be that type of guy too. Even Tony might be that type of guy that we've seen him struggle with catching the ball, whereas like his footwork is just phenomenal. So if you can scheme up ways that get him the ball in space and make guys miss, it just seems like he can do that as well.
I agree. I think that for both Rondale and Kadarius Toney, it's been tough in terms of trying to pinpoint for fantasy value, because I feel like they're both so landing spot dependent. For what you just said, I have huge concern. Like if Rondale Moore lands in a place where they just say, all right, you're our slot receiver, like go be a slot receiver, I have way bigger concerns over that than if you told me that same thing about Elijah Moore.
Yeah.
If you put Tony or Rondale Moore in a situation where it's like, okay, we're committed to getting you touches in a variety of ways, getting you in space and just letting you use athleticism, somebody that we've, like an offense like, New Orleans that we've seen do this time and time again, or any of these, kind of forward thinking offenses to put their athletes in space and let them make a play. But I'll be interested to see where they both end up. If they both land in spots like that, I could see the arrow point way up for them both for fantasy. Right now, I prefer Elijah Moore to both of them. He's another guy that I warmed up a lot on down the stretch as we've gotten closer to this. I think that I forget who it was, and I feel bad not being able to credit it right now, but someone tweeted something just a couple days ago about, seeing like shades of Antonio Brown in him. And I was like, oh, I see
feel like
all
it was
of it,
Matt Harmon, but
yeah, it might've been. I was like, I think you're right. It was Matt Harmon. I was like,
yeah.
I kind of love that. Like in terms of after the catch, once he get the ball in his hands, but he's got such soft hands and he has the athletic ability. I can't wait to see where he ends up. But in terms of the shorter guys, there's exciting players kind of across the board there. I'm really, really excited to see where all three of those guys do end up.
I completely agree. And it goes back to the point with Chase where I think he's the only guy that projects as a true number one in this class. But I think this class is full of exciting secondary pieces, and I think that, people are down on Devontae Smith a little bit because of the size, but I think that people are kind of miscasting him a little bit to start with. They saw him win the Heisman. They expected he's going to come in and be an NFL alpha. And I just don't see that type of player in him. And I think that, Elijah Moore is the same type of way. Just these guys, they're great complementary pieces. And as we always hear people talk about building a basketball team when you're building your wide receiver core. And these guys are definitely fill roles in the NFL. They're just not those type of guys that for fantasy purposes get you super excited that they're going to see 12 targets a game. But certainly we see offenses evolving and doing a much better job at getting the ball in space. And so that's what we hope that we can see from some of these guys.
Couple more receivers that at least had some fairly impressive showings. I love Amon-Ra St. Brown. I have professed this early and often. I will go down rightfully or wrongfully on Amon-Ra. But 4.51 was a better time than I expected him to run. Similar, I didn't expect him to run anywhere as close to fast as like Chase ran, but I didn't have real big concerns about how fast he would run because I feel like I've consistently seen him create separation throughout his college career. I think he's a guy that can pretty immediately or pretty early on in his NFL career contribute on the inside as a slot receiver, but can also be a big time weapon in the red zone like we saw at USC as well. But 4.51, I just got to shout out Amon-Ra. Like, he ran 4.51, and I was like, my guy, 4.51, Amon-Ra. I knew you could do it.
Yeah, that's a guy that I put that tape on. I watched him, and I was just like, I've seen this guy before. I think I've seen Robert Woods. It's like I've seen this USC wide receiver before.
Juju
Smith-Schuster. It's like they make an assembly line out there, and they just roll off these guys that are like 6'1", built well, can run that 4.5, and they just are NFL wide receivers. Yeah. And again, it's
I've been a sucker for every one of them too.
Yeah, well, you haven't gone wrong though, and especially Aguilar, like turning it around. You know, he was the most disappointing one, arguably, out of the bunch. But he turns it around this past year. People are obviously very down on Juju. I actually got him in the late 8th round of a startup that we're doing. We're doing this crazy pros and Joes. It's going to be a C2C and Superflex, and so we're in the middle of that startup. You know, people like Christian Williams, Kane and Shane from the W Marketplace, they've got a team together. You know, Jacob with Fantasy Intervention, he's in there. So it's a lot of fun guys that, you know, I know pretty well and I see around Twitter, but I was shocked at that value on him. But that's I'm taking you way off base. But again, like, this goes back to seeing those USC receivers over and over again. And they certainly have a type that, you know, gets attracted to that, and they play in the NFL.
Yeah, for sure. And then, you know, we talked about some fast guys, maybe the fastest or one of the fastest we've seen so far across this pro day circuit. Anthony Schwartz out of Auburn, 4.26.
Yeah.
Real fast. I mean, we knew he was fast, but that is a fast time. He feels like the perfect kind of guy that all the buzz so far has been like, oh, you know, he'll be a later round guy, 4th round pick, 5th round pick. I think the NFL will love this guy because the NFL shows every year that they love this kind of track speed. Like, John Ross was a top 10 pick because of it, or, you know, top half of the first round. I think Schwartz is a guy that'll go way earlier than we're thinking right now. I can see him going on day 2 of the NFL draft, whether it's late round 2 or, you know, early to mid round 3. I just have a feeling that someone's going to fall in love with that speed. I mean, 4.26 is something you can't teach, can't coach that.
Yeah, and Auburn used him on those jet sweeps all the time, but he was able to get deep and catch the ball. My concern with him is that we've seen those guys kind of turn into very boom bust fantasy pieces where they're fantastic for a best ball build if they're going to be in the lineup, but, you know, you're praying when you put them in your lineup that it only takes one play to pay off. But if they don't get that one play, then you're looking at those 5 points and you're wondering, what have I done to myself?
Yeah, exactly.
But I do think I completely agree with you. I think that he's a guy that, you know, he runs that 4.26. Teams are always going to be attracted to speed, and he's going to be a guy that is really going to stand out. Makes you question between him and Seth Williams, what's going on with Bo Nix? Because, man, that it seemed like everything was set up perfect for him this past year, and the wheels just completely fell off in Auburn. But it's fun to, you know, you're a little bit of a college football guy too. It's just fun seeing some of these. And then you go back and you see these guys in the NFL. Like, I know Clemson was forever before Deshaun Watson came in. They were just this assembly line of NFL talent, and they'd figure out a way to lose 3 games a year.
Yeah.
But it's it made you question what happened down there in Auburn. And I know they've obviously got Brian Harrison coming in and bringing in a new coach, but I don't know. Yeah. I think that he will get drafted higher. It'll be interesting to see where he ends up.
What do you think about Seth Williams? I know we didn't really talk about anything about him prior, but are you in on Seth Williams? I'm not a huge fan. I don't dislike him. I think he's fine, but he doesn't do anything to me to separate from, you know, any of some of the bigger body guys. I don't know. I don't see him as somebody that I feel really confident in establishing himself as like I hate saying like an alpha, you know, wide receiver at the pro level, but probably settling in as like a 3rd option, 4th option, something like that. I could see being the case, but
Yeah, and it was really hard. College football is just a weird, choppy season. And
Yeah.
you could just tell, like, there was a bunch of these guys that they came back. Go back to my Buckeyes. Shaun Wade was another guy that they came back to school, and I think they had aspirations for raising their draft stock, obviously. But then when things kind of just went haywire, yeah, they just kind of wanted to make it through the year. And I kind of got that vibe off Williams several times throughout the year, that it was just one of those that, again, like a lost season in Auburn. I think maybe the guys were looking towards, some guys knew they were leaving. They didn't think the coach would be around, type thing. And, we see guys check out in those type of instances, but you're still going to play him because he's a guy that's going to be in the NFL. But I completely agree. Again, it goes back to really looking for size guys in this class. Between him, Marshall, I know Nico Collins is another guy that seems to be moving up the board quite a bit right now. But after all these guys measure in, and all these guys are 5'9" across the board, teams are going to be looking for that prototypical 6'4" guy too, because those play a key role in the NFL.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll talk about one more receiver, and then we'll wrap it up with some of the running back guys here. But we were tweeting about him the other day, so we had to give the dude Dwayne Eskridge some love. I can't wait to see where he ends up. I know that some people are out, slightly older prospect. You and I had talked, we like that he has the defensive back background. He is explosive for days. Super, super explosive. I can't wait to see. I think he comes in and is immediately a capable deep threat on a team, but with the chance to be much more. I think he's somebody that, I'm not comping him, player style for player style, but it kind of reminds me of the pre-draft process for Terry McLaurin a couple of years ago, where it was kind of slow for everybody to catch up. But then when you got there and got a chance to watch him and see what he could do, and you were like, oh man, he's explosive. I don't care if he's a little bit older or, what the, full college production looked like. I think he is a baller and is going to be a steal for somebody who takes him.
I completely agree. You talked about that DB background. I just love it. It's almost, I was reading Matt Waldman, the RSP earlier, and he's talked about him being like Cortland Finnegan and the wide receiver core. He just has that dog that you love to see, and it's a little bit too much maybe, but it makes you excited. And he's a guy that he can win all over the field. He catches the ball fantastic. He run almost any route that you want him to run. He can be involved in the return game. I thought I knew we were going to talk about him. And so I was kind of looking around the league at maybe where it'd be a good fit. And I thought maybe Minnesota would be a really fun fit because their special teams were horrendous last year. So it's the type of thing where he can earn a role in special teams, and that wide receiver depth chart is wide open. Once you get past those first two guys, would be competing with a guy like Olabisi Johnson, which Olabisi Johnson is a football player, but he's not bringing much to the table other than being a football player.
He is a football player.
He is a football player, and that's a good thing, and that's a bad thing sometimes because it's. But I think that there's an opening there that maybe that'd be a fun fit for Eskridge to land in. But you're right. I'm a MAC guy. I went to Ohio University, so I have a special affinity for the MAC guys that I pay attention to them every year. I've seen some pre-draft people saying, well, he's going against guys that are going to be selling insurance. And I think you can make that argument for almost any college football team. Once you get past, talent is concentrated so much at the Ohio States, the Clemsons, the Alabamas, the top talent areas. Once you get past it's Vanderbilt. Are those guys going to be? Those guys are going to be behind a computer, and so it's like, come on a little bit, And there are some guys in the MAC that will be in the NFL. So I'm less concerned about that. But watching his tape over and over again, he's a guy that he just gets the ball in his hands in different areas of the field, finds different ways to win, and he can take it all the way when he ever gets it.
Yeah, totally agree. The explosive ability he has is just different. And I agree with what you said, that you're going to get that in, almost every conference, that regardless of at what level, whether he's playing insurance agents or, corners in the NFL. I think explosive is explosive no matter which way you cut it, and he'll have a role in the NFL for sure. And I think Minnesota would be a really interesting fit. I also think Green Bay in that same division would be an interesting fit for him to come in there. So we'll see where he ends up. But wrapping it up with the running backs, I had to start with something disappointing. My guy Chuba Hubbard, not a great time. Not great for Chuba. we still stand Chuba Hubbard, but we will own that he did not run as fast as he should have. I think he was clocked at 4.5 or like 4.48, just under 4.5. Not great for somebody who has shown impressive speed and has been, talked about having track speed for, his whole college career after that 2,000-yard season at Oklahoma State. I'm still in on Chuba at the right cost. I think that the NFL will still be in on Chuba because I think that after, Najee and Travis Etienne and to an extent Javonte Williams, after that, it becomes kind of, stack them how you like them sort of thing. And I think somebody that runs a zone running scheme will take a chance on Chuba and hope that his athleticism shows better, more reminiscent of what we've seen on tape or from his playing days at Oklahoma State than it did with the pro day. I think fast is fast. I think he's a fast guy who probably ran a bad time. But a couple of thoughts that you have on Chuba, whether you're in, you're out, what you think about him at the next level.
I think it was, we go back to that topic, that Seth Williams topic that we talked a little bit about. He was another guy that he just kind of seemed like his mind was elsewhere this year. It just didn't, I don't know. I watched him in 2019 and he was, explosive and everything that you want to see. And in 2020, it just kind of looked like he went down at first contact. It just he wasn't making guys miss that you want to see that he had shown previously. I'm worried on him. He's not a guy that I'm high on at all. You're right that we've seen him look fast, but we've seen him look fast in the Big 12. Maybe
sure.
We've seen a lot of guys look fast in the Big 12. And we go back, we talked about, Bryce Love, had 2,000 yards. He got hurt, obviously, but Pumphrey, I think he might still be the NCAA all-time rushing leader. We've seen these big seasons in the past that just don't translate at the NFL level. My concern with Chuba is that we didn't really see him used in the passing game, and kind of guy his size, that speed, that's going to be his path to get on the field. And so, obviously, hopefully, he's got that skill set, and that would be allow him to get the playing time. But we didn't see it. And so I worry about that, kind of what's his path to get on the field.
Yeah, he definitely, I had written some stuff about him previously in the past, and I think he definitely needs to show improvement as a pass protector and utilization in the passing game as a receiver just to try and keep himself on the field. The biggest thing for me that was strange from 2019 to 2020, I agree, he looked like he kind of checked out and there was injuries and new offensive linemen and a whole story with it. But in 2019, it was like, okay, he's fast. And yes, he's running away from guys. But there was also a lot. It wasn't all outside stuff. There was plenty of examples of like, oh, this is good inside zone running.
Yes.
Reading the right blocks, showing good vision. And we didn't see really any of it in 2020. But like anything else, I think there's a chance he gets pushed down far enough that I'm like, oh, I'm taking Chuba here at this value every time.
He's that big name, though, that I've seen so far in mocks, and he just goes way earlier than he's going in that, the way that I've done the mock. I've done a handful of mocks. We've probably been in mocks together with like the draft Bible stuff that's going on and whatever else. But when I'm in that second round, I see these wide receivers and even the couple tight ends there, and it's hard for me to pull the trigger on a running back in that area just because I'm so excited about these wide receivers having passed to playing time. And so I usually end up missing on like the Michael Carters and the Chubas because they go in that range. And I would just rather have one of these wide receivers that have slipped down the board.
Very reminiscent of last year where it was like, oh my God, the wide receiver is available through, the end of round one through like the middle, even to the end of round two of rookie drafts, especially in one quarterback formats, was ridiculous. It was insane. It was the top of round two last year. You were drafting T. Higgins or Denzel Mims, or Justin Jefferson was going at the back end of round one in a lot of those drafts in one quarterback formats. So I agree. The value is there at wide receiver again. You'll get to, round three and beyond in rookie drafts. And that's where it becomes like, all right, this is what's left of the running back class after the couple big names, and, try and call your shot on who you like best and hope they define themselves a real role.
Exactly.
Speaking of Michael Carter, I saw some people kind of freak out about, both him and Javonte Williams testing times at the North Carolina Pro Day. I wasn't really concerned too much with either of them, honestly. I think 4.5 flat for Michael Carter is kind of about what I expected. I think people have gotten a little bit out of touch with like how fast a sub 4.4 running back is. It's not really the norm. And Javonte Williams running 4.55 is kind of exactly what he looks like to me on tape. Like I think that matches up exactly. But one thing I had mentioned actually when talking with Christian recently on his show was the number that popped off the pro day results for North Carolina for me was Michael Carter's sub 4-second short shuttle, because it was, I think, 3.98, and it just reinstates to me everything I've watched on tape, the stuff that I really like about him, the shiftiness, the agility, the kind of nimble, crafty footwork in the open field. Nothing that gave me a lot of cause for concern or alarm either way on those guys. But any reaction for you on either Javonte or Michael Carter, or just kind of status quo, same as it ever was?
No, their pro day didn't change anything for me.
Yeah.
I do think that Carter is a guy that I have more faith that he can have utility in the passing game, which would be his key to getting on the field. The same school comps. Gio Bernard is kind of a guy that sticks out. But the thing I like about Carter is he's not afraid to finish a run, even for a smaller guy. He'll stick his nose in there and he's not afraid to hit somebody. But I do think that there's upside for a utility in the passing game that could grow into even more being. I don't think he's not going to be a feature back. It's really hard at his weight to project him to be there. But he is an exciting guy that I think that you can definitely get some utility out of in your fantasy lineup. Williams, exactly. It's what we saw on tape. He's not going to be a guy that I've just seen way too many Nick Chubb comps, and I don't think people understand how special of a player Nick Chubb is. I think maybe like some of that is being in Cleveland, sharing that backfield with Hunt. Nick Chubb is a generational running back, and he might very well be the most talented running back in the league. And Javonte Williams is not that. Javonte Williams is a very good player. He certainly can develop and be a guy that, especially in this class, that you're kind of desperate for running back options. He can be a potentially maybe a running back one, but more comfortably landing into the lead role of a committee. I think that there are maybe some hopes and dreams that are being placed on Javonte right now, just because of the lack of depth throughout the class that I don't necessarily share. But it's one of those things you just have to consider things relative to what's available. And certainly there's going to be a running back team that with the 106 or 107 that's desperate, that's going to take Javonte in hopes that he's going to be their guy.
So where does he stack up with the rest of the class for you? Is Javonte RB3 or somebody else?
He's RB3.
Yeah.
I think that he was my RB2 for a little bit, but ETN coming in at 215, kind of where you want to see him.
Yeah, that was big.
Yeah, I think that was big. That kind of gives you more faith that he can be the more that lead back. And we've just seen so much usage in the passing game for him. It's something that he's really grown and developed throughout the years. Cause I know when he first came in, they didn't use him in that role at all.
Yeah.
And then towards the end of his senior year, it seemed like that's almost all the touches that he got was either on a zone read or was through the passing game. Clemson just Christian again calls Trevor Lawrence screen boy. But it's one of those things that it's, if it works, they do it. And but it's, I have him at my number 2 running back. Just I think we saw what we wanted to see out of him.
Yeah. After those 3 guys, anybody that you're really high on, whether it's your guys at 4 and 5 or deeper down the class, anybody you're willing to dart throw on a little bit later that you feel good about projecting them to the next level?
Yeah, the way I see this class kind of stacking up is once you get past Williams, there's kind of that section where the Michael Carter, the Chuba, Kenny Gainwell is kind of in there. I think he's kind of at the front of that line where they're guys that you could see being used in the passing game over and over again and having those roles that, especially in a PPR league, can be very valuable. Then there's 2 backs that I think kind of are hanging out in the middle that I think are maybe being overlooked that could be that feature back type role. And that'd be Trey Sermon and Ramondre Stevenson. I saw you.
Let's go.
Stevenson. Yeah. But those are guys that are bringing the build that you love to see and that you've seen carry the lumber. And, they're landing in that third, like they're almost landing late third right now.
Yeah.
And so that's where, if you taking these wide receivers and, you're kind of still placing a chip somewhere, those are 2 guys that I like a lot. I don't know that I'll end up, I have a home dynasty league that I cannot imagine myself ending up with Sermon in just because it's all Buckeyes fans. And so he's going to go.
Yeah.
But looking throughout the class, it seems like a lot of those satellite backs, and then those kind of two guys are kind of hanging out in the middle as that potential. Chris Carson has always been my Sermon comp. I said it months ago. He just kind of has that build that you see him growing into that role and being able to be that feature back. Obviously, he's had injury concerns throughout his college career. Hopefully, we hear all the time that this guy's not injury prone is not actually a thing. And obviously what happened with Alabama was a freak injury. There's kind of just guy hit him exactly wrong. So he was out of that game. But I was very impressed with him this past year. It was one of those that he came in to the Ohio State backfield and it was very unsettled. In the first couple of games, it was just like this. Who's this guy? Come on, we don't have somebody better than him. And by the end of the year, it was like, oh my God. And I don't know that I saw so much single season development within at least Ohio State wise, much less a college running back, that a guy that at the beginning of the year, it just looked like he was looking for first contact and going down. Whereas at the end of the year, it looked like he was setting up everything perfectly with his eyes, being able to make guys miss and set them up on the second level. And you just love what we saw coming down the stretch out of him.
Yeah, I like both of those guys a lot as well. Stevenson is somebody, like you said, I just wrote him up recently, and I hope he lands in a place where he gets to be more than just like a short yardage back, because I do think he can be more. I think he's better in the passing game than he gets credit for, and he obviously has the build to shoulder a big workload. But for a guy as big as he is and as strong as he is, he's another guy he's fairly agile. He can make some moves out there as well. So we don't have that season, at a higher level, aside from JUCO when he first entered school, but with, an extended season or, because of the suspension, et cetera, we don't get to see him in, 11, 12 games. But I'm really interested to see where he goes, because I think a team will fall in love that he has the build and has the size that, okay, this guy can be treated, a little bit more like a featured runner. So I'm excited to see where he goes. And Sermon, I think, is somebody I would, aside from my Myles Gaskin shares, I would love to see if like Miami held off on, not spending an early pick on Najee or Etienne and, opted to hold off a little bit and draft somebody like Sermon. I think he would fit really nicely in that offense. But yeah, another guy that I think, because of the way he's built, I think the NFL will gravitate towards both of those guys.
And he's almost the guy that has won by not testing. He's just kind of, and you can't argue with what he put on tape at the end of the year. Again, the Northwestern game and the Clemson game. I mean, that was up there with, I think that might have been a school record for a 2-game sample for how many yards he gained. So anytime you break records at Ohio State,
it's a good thing.
Schools, you got to raise your eyebrows a little bit if records get broken at those type of schools.
That is a good thing. Well, Jeff, I appreciate you hopping on and talking all this fun stuff. We were in crazy season for sure. But please, one more time, for anybody who hasn't checked out your work or isn't following you on Twitter, I'm sure they are, but please plug all your stuff and make sure they know where they can find you.
Again, that's Jeff Bell. That's number 4, whom J Bell tolls on Twitter. I'm involved with FantasyPros, doing NFL content and Devy content with them, and involved with Going for 2 as well. And again, I am very excited to announce the upcoming Devy Royale with myself, Kevin Coleman, The Boys 22 on Twitter, and Christian Williams at C Williams NFL on Twitter. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I think it's going to be worth checking out. Hopefully we're able to put together a good product launching here in the next couple of weeks. And so I'm looking very much forward to that.
Cool, man. Well, I appreciate it again. Best of luck with everything.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. I'll definitely check out the show, and I'm sure we'll do this again soon. It was great having you on.
Absolutely. I'm thrilled to be here.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.